We begin with Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, with Allah's signature, the merciful benefactor, the merciful redeemer. We thank Allah for another opportunity to address you on a very serious topic of discussion that the Qur'an refers to as Nafs and Nafsan Wahida, which means the soul and the essence of the soul. I'm going to be referencing some notes from Imam Deen Mohammed and what he has had to say about this very subject. And we will also be discussing the term Rooh, which has been translated as spirit, but we're going to be doing that this time next week. So you'll be hearing from me not only today, but also exactly 1 week from today, next Friday. So when I'm quoting from Imam Muhammad's notes, I'll let you know that these are his quotes. And when I'm giving you my own commentary, I will let you know that also. We're going to begin with words from Imam Deen Mohammed. He is speaking now about the influence of God's will. Quote, God says, and he breathes from his own nafs, from his own self. He breathes into the man he made, and that's what made that mortal a living man, living person. When he received the breath of life, not this breath that every child has to get to be separated from the mother's body and have an independent life of its own, but it's the influence of God's will. That's the breath that God shares with every human person. Something of his Rooh, something of the influence of his own will. And that is our essence. That is our precious life. That is what gives life to our spirit and to our thinking. If we don't have it, we don't have life. Not in our spirit, not in our thinking. My commentary. Imam Muhammad in this particular quote is giving us insight into two aspects or into two concepts that are given to us in the Qur'an, both of which have been translated as soul. The first one he's discussing when he speaks about the breath of God, quote unquote, he's discussing the word Rooh, which, as I said, we'll be dealing with more extensively this time next week. But what he is actually saying is that it is that breath coming from God, the breath of God, the Rooh of God, that is serving to activate the soul that is within the human essence called Nafs, N-A-F-S, if you're transliterating. So both of those concepts have been captured within these quotes. And it's important to know that nafs is usually translated as soul, S-O-U-L, but ruh, although in a couple of places in the Qur'an, it also is translated as soul, but it is more definitively described as being spirit. Nafs is the soul, while ruh is the spirit which activates the nafs or the soul. So Allah speaks about breathing his Rooh into a creation that he is in the process of creating. The word breathe means crossing over into the ether. The BR in breathe means to cross over, like bring me something. Most words in English that have BR in the beginning represent crossing over from one space and filling up the next space. Whether it's a bridge where you begin on one end, but you end up filling up space on the other side of the bridge. If I borrow something from you, I'm depleting some of my resources and filling up your pockets with some of my stuff or some of my funds, etc. That BR normally means crossing over. And crossing over into the breathe, or breath. It means crossing over into the ether. And the ether is that element which is the motherboard, if you will, which produced the major four elements of air, water, fire, and land. Ether is considered to be the fifth element, when in reality it is the first element that produced the subsequent four: air, water, fire, and land. The first element produced was air, and it is the only element which cannot be claimed by any individual as their own. Listen carefully. Air must be shared. So Allah breathed something into the human vessel that of necessity must be shared within a cooperative. During the days of chattel slavery here in this country, the so-called slave master, as proud as he was of his whiteness and of his authority in the land, he could not help but share the air with his lowly slave servant. There's no way of stopping anyone from being in contact with and benefiting from air unless you cut off the air supply. But Allah made that air free for all. Going back to a quote from Imam Muhammad, nature says how something is formed and performs. Qur'an tells us of God's Nafs. Continuing the quote, character is another way of saying nature. Nature is another way of saying how is it formed and how does it perform of its own substance, of its own essence, of its own nature. My commentary. The English word nature, Nature, can actually be exchanged linguistically with the word mature, Mature, in that the letter N and the letter M are interchangeable as consonants. So nature, I repeat, is also suggesting the word mature. Understanding that, we can deduce that everything in nature matures. Now, if you are not maturing, if you are immature, if you are an amateur, you are not truly participating in nature as God intended nature to create and evolve you. Your character is supposed to mature. Your essence is designed to mature, and your substance is to also experience maturity. That substance and essence is called Nafs in the Qur'an, translated again as soul. It is explained as human essence and personality. Going back to quotes from Imam Muhammad, that is explaining to us the nature and character. What is the character of the Qur'an? If I ask you, what is the character of an Imam? Anybody, any Imam. If you know his character, you know how to tell me something about his character. And most likely you're going to begin with likes and dislikes. That is how you're going to see him. What is liked in him and what is disliked in him. So then you will start telling me something about his character. Continuing the quote from Imam Muhammad, there is nothing to be disliked in the Qur'an. You will be telling me what is liked in the Qur'an. Now he's speaking about the Qur'an as character, describing the Qur'an as you would describe character. Continuing, what is the Qur'an loved for? What attracts people to it? Its purity, number one. Its justice, its purity, etc. The Qur'an has its own nature and its own character, and it is from God. It is God's communication, and it tells us how to perceive God. It communicates not only a message to us, it communicates also the presence or the nafs of God to us. Nafs means person, soul, essential nature, etc. So it communicates God to us. He's talking about the Qur'an. My comments. The human soul or nafs has a built-in medium that is able to communicate directly with God. If I communicate with another person via telephone, the person who answers the phone on the other end allows for that line of communication. However, the phone itself is not the person. In that same way, Allah is not the nafs. He has a nafs, but at the same time is not his nafs. That's not who Allah is. He is Allah and has no comparison or description. وَلَمْ يَكُنْ لَهُ كُفُوًا أَحَدٌ. He says in the Qur'an, and there is nothing to compare with his oneness. So he doesn't have a nafs in terms of its ability to compare with your human nafs. He has a nafs as a means of communication with your human nafs, phone to phone. Allah communicates through his creation, but Allah is not creation. He is the source creator. Going back to Imam Muhammad's commentary. Muhammad saw Allah through revelation. Muhammad didn't see Allah except through the revelation, and no one can see Allah except by revelation or through revelation. That is the only way we can see Allah. Allah reveals himself to everybody. We cannot know him. La tudrihul absaru. You cannot catch God with your eyes. So says the Qur'an. It didn't say aynain, two eyes. It said absar. It means your vision. If you use your rational mind, your physical eyes and your rational mind and everything that you can see with, still you cannot catch God in your perception or in your vision unless he reveals himself. And he reveals himself directly. It means he communicates directly to worthy receptors of his communication, meaning his prophets. They are the worthy receptors, and they see God in what he revealed to them. My commentary. The English word perception is from the smaller word perceive. And the word perceive means by way of sieving. And a sieve is used for what is called a sifting. Therefore, the word perceive means by way of sifting. We sift materials in order to separate out the large unnecessary parts from the finer, more delicate substance. This is also what the soul does. It is a cosmic sifter. I will explain that phrase before we conclude. The human being comes into broad levels of insight, meaning we're able to see the whole picture. But we cannot see the whole picture until we first allow ourselves to come into vision by way of what's called analytical perception. The word whole is related to the word soul. If we spell soul as S-O-L-E, it becomes representative of oneness, one whole entity. The soul is supposed to also represent oneness. The symbols of Safa and Marwa are also related to these ideas. Stay with me, put on your thinking caps. Safa is sifting. Can you hear the consonantal connections in Safa and sift? Whereas Marwa is related to Ra or Ra'i, which gives us the idea of seeing and seeing the broader picture. The ancient Egyptian god, small g, called Amun-Ra, carries the same significance as the ideas inherent in Safa and Marwa. Amun means closed eye and represents the analytical thinker, the one who breaks it all down until they can see it through a small type of peephole. When you look out your peephole to see who's knocking at your door, you don't normally see the entire person. You might see their eye looking back at your one eye because you have one eye closed. This is what that ancient Egyptian symbol of Amun-Ra represents. Amun means closed eye, and Ra means open eye, the one who sees it all, and that's why he was depicted as the sun, S-U-N, which shines light to all within its territories. Now, when we analyze, listen to the word, when we analyze, we view things through anal eyes. And the anus, excuse the expression, has one peephole which sifts leftover matter out of your system. We're talking science. We're talking nature. We're talking fitra. And this is the science of analyzation. The scientist will normally analyze one thing at a time. Going back to Imam Muhammad's commentary, quote, "And then you can see God by studying the objective world as the first thinkers who later came to be called seers and then later came to be called prophets in history. According to the history of religion, they saw God firstly through his creation. They saw his will. They saw his plan. A great artist, how did you come to know that artist as a great artist? Not by knowing him in his flesh, in his body, but by knowing him in his works. You have to know him in his works. I studied for many years and still study, and God has made it so simple for me. This is Imam Muhammad I'm quoting. It's so easy. The religion is so simple and easy for me. I thank God. Problems, questions that held me for many years, when I approached them with just common sense, understanding came, and I was freed from being burdened by those questions anymore. And I said to myself, this is ridiculous that we judge and don't judge by rules that we have ourselves. Make a big deal. Oh God, is that God? Can you see God? Yes, you can see him. No, you can't see him. We make a big deal out of that, and we don't think about our own selves. I can have an identical twin, and he can walk right by you, and you might say, that's Imam W. Deen Mohammed. But you'll be incorrect. You didn't see me, did you? You thought you saw me, but you didn't. So how are we really seen? We are seen in our abstract form, not in our concrete form. If anybody has really seen another person, they have seen that person in their abstract body, their invisible, their transparent body, not in their physical form. A stranger seeing me today sees what you see. So how does he know me? If you identify me as my physical body, physical form, then the stranger sees me right now, sees just what you saw, and he doesn't know me. So we are not what the camera captures. We are the higher self inside of that concrete body. That's what we are. That's our true self. Continuing the quotations from W. Deen Mohammed. The soul of man reaches everything that our five senses can reach, and even what our five senses can't reach. Our imagination goes beyond what our five senses can reach, seeking and stretching our minds to know what is the role of life, what purpose have I been created for, etc. Such questions open up the mind and also expand the soul. If we are sincere and truthful, our consciousness will be elevated to the heaven of our soul, as high as the human mind and spirit can go. Unlimited ascension for the soul of mankind. Whew. My comments. I consider this ascension that Imam Muhammad is discussing to be what is spoken of also in the ancient Indian system known as chakras. Chakras represent centers of evolutionary energies which operate alongside your spine. The word spine is another one of those code words, and it means pine or sacred pine. It also means secret pine. The pine being referenced is the pineal gland, also known as the third eye, which when activated brings one into the beginnings of what I call supra-intuitive insight. The Qur'an calls it Ainul Yaqeen, which means the eye of certainty, the single eye. Not Ainain, Ainul Yaqeen, the eye, the single eye of certainty. The human mind ascends beyond five sense perception to the point of where consciousness becomes awareness. Listen carefully. Awareness is when your five sense mind comes to rest as a tool for making artificial distinctions and differences. That is the normal activity for the normal intellect on earth. It makes distinctions. It names things. It separates out things into categories. But it's a tool which has also been responsible for making artificial distinctions and differences. For humans, those differentiations have been responsible for artificial discrepancies such as racism, sexism, classism, egoism, and countless other forms of invalid biases. Back to Imam Muhammad's commentary. Our common bond of life for us is the spiritual life. We differ physically in color, size, shape, etc. But in terms of the soul, we don't differ. The soul of every human being is the same. We change our own souls by our choices in the world. Our souls change, but we are all born with the same soul. We may be born with the different features of Japanese, Asian features of an Englishman, and etc. We're born with all of these different features, but when it comes to the soul, we are essentially one. Nafsin wahida is the expression in Arabic in the Qur'an, translated one single soul. My comments. The word spiritual is a reference to the electromagnetic energies which travel up the spine in a spiraling fashion. The word spiritual and spirit, those words are from the word spiral. The word spiral is a code word also for sacred pyre. Spiral, I repeat, is a code word for sacred pyre, and a pyre is a fire, and it is also a furnace. Back to Imam Muhammad's comments. Quote, from one single soul, God created or made us all, and then we come into the citizenry of all people and become honorary citizens of all nations. We have become one soul again. We're universal. But as long as you shut out some people and you don't like them, not because you had any personal experience with them that made you reject them, but you reject them because they belong to a particular group. That kind of idea and thinking will never permit us to come into that one soul where we are at peace with ourselves, with others who have good intentions. And even if they don't have good intentions, we still want good for them. When we come into that state, we have become aware, or we have become awakened in our consciousness that God wants for us. Taqwa, religious consciousness for Muslims, is taqwa. The productive people of this planet Earth, they have accepted to be citizens of humanity, and that citizenship is before our national citizenship. It is more important than our national citizenship if we understand it. All other identities should be built upon that identity. I should see my race supported by my identity as a human person, as a person of human decency, having common life with all other people. I should see that identity as the support for other identities. If I want to build upon my nationality, I should build upon my nationality with an appreciation for my human life in its excellence, more than my appreciation for my political persuasion or even my racial ambition, the aspirations of my race. Nothing is more important than the life of the original soul created by God. In religion, we refer to Adam in his perfect state. Nothing is more important for us to identify in than that. If all of us are identifying in that, we can have peace. We can develop our consciousness better, and we can realize a much richer spirituality. Continuing the quote from Imam Muhammad, God has made this life that I am addressing now. It is a consciousness. It is the elevation of our moral life. The morals get to be of better and better quality. When we accept that life, then we have an equality that is good for us with all good people. We are all equal, not in intellect. Some of us are superior, some inferior. But in this consciousness, we all can ascend to the highest position in the world of human consciousness, or the circle of human consciousness. We can ascend to the highest position. We don't have to be formally educated in this world to do that. You only have to accept your good moral nature, respect it, and build upon it. Trust your good moral nature, and you will grow and grow. It is that growth that best situates us to grow in all other ways. Allah says in the Qur'an, وَلْتَكُنْ مِنْكُمْ أُمَّةٌ يَدْعُونَ إِلَّا الْخَيْرِ وَيَأْمُرُونَ بِالْمَعْرُوفِ وَيَنْهَوْنَ عَنِ الْمُنْكَرِ وَأُولَٰئِكَ هُمُ الْمُفْلِحُونَ. Let there arise out of you a band of people inviting to all that is good, enjoining what is right and forbidding what is wrong. They are the ones to attain success. Continuing the quote from Imam Muhammad, we have to follow universal standards of decency. We should always aim for the best. Then we will grow in excellence and not fail to promote a sense of origin in the human being's excellence. Human beings evolve from inferior, despicable creatures. This is told to us in Scripture, but the aim in the human nature is for excellence, just like it is in everything else. The aim in matter is for excellence. That is why it has evolved to more and more excellence, beauty, and order. So to identify in that original life is what promoting this spirituality will do. It will bring more of us to identify in that life and be comfortable with one another and care for each other as members of the same family, because that's who we are. All of us are members of one human family. The Muslims are members in the Muslim family, but the Muslims were not guided by Prophet Muhammad to identify firstly as Muslims in some particular religious sense, but he wanted us to identify as Muslims in the universal sense, that we are Muslims by nature. every child is created a Muslim. Continuing the quote from Imam Deen Mohammed in my conclusion. So this Muslim has to understand that it operates based on two definitions. The first definition and most important definition is to be Muslims in your best condition as a human person created by God. Like a baby comes here with no evil design on the world. The baby learns that from us. If we are in our original nature that God gave us before it is spoiled by mistakes we make, we are in the true Muslim identity. Then we have the informed Muslim who is educated in the religion with Qur'an and the life of our Prophet. Then we become learned Muslims, conscious of the revealed disciplines for Muslim life. But without the first condition, the other one will not remain good. It will also deteriorate and become a great trouble for us. And when you look at the world of Muslims and we see how they are so divided and how we are not in most of the Muslim world pursuing human excellence, then you can understand why. Now, if you accept what I just said, it is because we have lost the first life. And it is the excellent human life that God created for us. We have lost the first life, and we're in these bodies, and we are disconnected, not attached anymore to the lifeline that God created for us. This life, this spirituality, it influences production more than anything else. If you want to produce materially, African American people having businesses, flourishing businesses in our neighborhood, in our community, grow in moral excellence and grow in appreciation for the human common excellence that we find all over the world. All people have it, and you will see God will be with you, and your own good nature will be supporting you, and you will become much more productive. This is not given for African American people, but I can't help but mention that we are a failing community. We are failing in our neighborhoods. We leave our neighborhood to others to supply the residents of the neighborhood with everything, and we just go on our own separate ways, not caring. We are satisfied just to have a residency somewhere, but we don't want responsibility to serve the residents. Other people are not like that. The Mexicans, I go through their neighborhood and I see so many businesses run by Mexicans. I see Mexican, Spanish business life, and it is alive. But when I come through my neighborhood, I can hardly find any sign that the business life of the African American people is alive. It seems to be dead. It is dead because we are not really in touch with our human excellence, and we are not building quality moral life. He made us from one soul. Nafs means person, but in this respect is never thought of as physical or material person, or not as flesh. The flesh body is called something different. Like in English, we say person and we say body. We have different terms. When we say body, you think of a material body. But when you say person, you think of a particular person by name. When you speak of persons as persons, you speak of them with some knowledge of them as a person. And if you have knowledge of them as a person, your knowledge of them as a person is more important than your knowledge of them as flesh. Nafs is from the same word. You get psyche, psychology, from the word nafs, nafasa. This word nafs in the Qur'an and the Arabic language is more closely related in meaning to the psyche of the human person than it is to anything else. And you know from psyche, you get psychology. And psychology does not always refer to the study of the mind. Each one of us have our own personal psychology. For each person, there is a psychology, not only a psyche, but there is also a psychology. Psychology means the way you are most likely to respond and behave spiritually. And that is why I said you are a spiritual body, more so than a material body. In the world, we study it and call it psychology. In religion, we call it spiritual sciences. The spiritual science of the human nature and behavior. So, from nafsin wahida, he made two. We have to get away from thinking of Adam and Eve in a material sense, as flesh. A lot of the students of religion have come up with these wrong ideas. Nafsun is self, and it also means soul. Have you ever made the connection for S-O-U-L and S-O-L-E? The sole of your foot. Which spelling do you use? S-O-L-E. It also means one, only. My sole purpose is to bring you to see God's way. Soul, S-O-L-E, means my only purpose is in that expression. But you don't have one. You have two souls. Everybody has two. So why is it called soul? Soul is not what they had in mind when they called it soul. They just didn't want to tell us exactly what they had in mind. They had S-O-U-L, soul. Your connection with your soul is taken off when your mind becomes alive. When you're born as a baby from your mother, your connection with your soul is turned off, disconnected, and you have to grow to be in touch with your own soul. End quote from Imam Muhammad, my comments. This is what I have been referring to as base-born intuition, which every infant is born with, and supra-intuition, which we have to condition ourselves to psychologically support. There is the soul of your solar plexus, and there is the soul, S-O-L, or singular sun, operating in your solar plexus that leads up to your pineal gland's third eye activation. Now, I know that's a bit much for some of you, but get the replay and study what I'm saying. This is the soul, the activation of your pineal gland's energies to bring you into supra-intuitive insight. This is the soul which brings us into connection with the cosmic procession. The cosmic procession, allowing you to become a cosmic frequency calculator. Every prophet of God is represented by this concept. They were all cosmic frequency calculators. How did they receive their respective revelations? They received it from on high. They received it from sources outside of this lowly dimension of differentiations and artificial distinctions. Every human being has been gifted with that same potential. All we have to do is stand up and rise to the challenge. Going back to Imam Deen Mohammed's quotes. Jesus walked on water. That means he could stand up in his own soul. When you stand on your own feet, you're supposed to be able to stand up in your own soul. But how many people can stand up in their own soul? They can't. When they say Jesus could stand on the water, they were saying Jesus could stand up in his soul, and Peter couldn't. Peter was the one who inherited the office of leadership over the Christian people, but he couldn't stand up in his own soul. He sank. The angels record, don't they? They record our deeds, but this is not talking about the angels. something is recording. It's your own soul. Your own soul registers what you do, good or bad. You'll forget it, but it's in your soul. Your soul will never release it. It'll stay there forever. Everything that happens in your life is recorded upon your soul, and it will stay there forever. Your soul records it. Now look at how the connection is made. You see, this is how you test someone to see if they know what they're talking about or not. If they don't know what they're talking about, it won't follow through. The meanings won't be consistent. The meanings won't be consistent, and this is revelation. It shouldn't only be consistent, it should be powerfully unfolding. It should not be just a little simple unfolding. It should be a powerful unfolding, a mighty unfolding, if it's revelation. And it is revelation. The mind forgets. The mind makes mistakes. The soul records perfectly everything that happens, but the soul and the mind are different. So you see how it starts? I hear and I obey. We hear and we obey. That's perfect obedience, right? Hear and immediately obey. Perfect obedience. And then the soul, the self, is not burdened except by what it has the capacity to bear. That's the soul. And then the soul is recording very accurately everything that we're doing, good or bad. Everything that we're registering on our mind goes to the soul and will never be erased unless God erases it. You have no power to erase it yourself. Is there any proof of this in psychology? Yes. They can bring up what happened to you when you were in your mother's stomach. Well, they claim that. They claim they can bring up a memory from you when you were in your mother's stomach. Not even born yet. You weren't even talking, but they know by the responses that this is a response from the fetus, not from a born child. So that means whatever happened in the fetus was recorded in your soul, and they were able to find some evidence of that. My concluding statements. The Nafs was created in order to facilitate the soul's ability to breathe. Breathing is give and take. Breathing is dispensing with what it is that you can no longer use and giving it up to those who can use it. Allah says in the Qur'an, they ask thee what they should give. Say, whatever you spend that is good is for parents and kindred and orphans and those in want and for wayfarers. And whatever you do that is good, Allah knows it well. So when we give sadaqah, when we give charity, when we give zakah, when we give of our time and our efforts and our finance, we are breathing, socially speaking. And that is the ultimate breath that our source creator would like to see us come into. But most people are unaware. This human soul called the Nafs is the most charitable tool provided to us by our source creator. Spend from it wisely.